So yesterday we had a speaker that came all the way from Hawaii to speak to us. Today we have a speaker who came all the way from Italy to speak to us. We're very pleased to have Ugo Perego. Perego? I should know by now, but I always get confused. So Ugo has a BS and MS in Health Sciences from Brigham Young University, Provo, Utah, and a PhD in Genetics and Biomolecular Sciences from the University of Pavia. He's the director of the Rome Institute campus, the SNI coordinator for Central Italy and Malta, and a visiting scientist at the University of Pavia. He's lectured on population migrations, ancestry, forensics, and history. There's a lot more you can read in here about him. He's eminently qualified, and he's my friend, Ugo Perego.
It's good to be here. Always a little anxious when I come to Fair Mormon. You know, I know you guys are a smart crowd, so I don't know. You should be condescending or accommodating, based on Ben's word, toward me. I'm very grateful for what Ben had talked about. I don't know if that was purposely made it that way, that I would come right after him. The only request I asked was to speak on a Friday, that I couldn't be here on Thursday. But he has created and done a tremendous job. In fact, I'm sorry for you that you have to listen to me, because I think he would have done a much better job at addressing this topic than I can do. Ben is really a smart cookie. So just want to tell you a little story that happened just a few weeks ago. And we are here visiting from Italy with my family. We're attending a local family ward, and the first Sunday we were there, and they asked us to introduce ourselves. Somebody came up to my wife and asked, is your husband some sort of kind of like famous LDS geneticist? And she looked at him, and she said, well, based on what people write about him on the internet, he's quite infamous. And so hopefully today I won't make myself more infamous by the things I'm going to share. I'm not definitely trying to change anybody's perspective, and the thought I'm sharing is mostly my interpretation of things that the church has shared with us about this topic. Now, my goal today is to explain what the church believes about evolution, and I hope you fully appreciate what Ben has done in creating the right framework in scripture interpretation, especially on the creation account. I will focus on creation of man, particularly, or the evolution of man, the origin of man, but I'm doing this for a specific purpose. And that purpose is to tie it in with the second half of my presentation, which will be dealing with some issues that have to do with Book of Mormon and DNA. And that is many of the events that are supported by genetics with regard to the people in America predate the 6,000 years Adam. Right? And so when you come to have some preconceived notion with the fact that there could have been nothing, or that the church is teaching you that there is nothing before 6,000 years ago, then you tend to dismiss a lot of the genetic data that somehow help clarify certain issues with regard to Book of Mormon and DNA studies. And so hopefully I will be able to connect them in a way that makes sense to you today. So a few things to ponder always. For those of you that have heard me speaking before, you're going to see and hear again some of this concept. But I learned as a teacher that repetition is a good thing. And so science or religion, do we really have to make a choice between one or the other? Are they really found at the end of the same spectrum, or they can coexist? Scientific method help understand how things are made versus why things are made and what is the purpose and how do we fit in that picture. I taught human biology for a couple of years at a college here in Utah, and about a third of my curriculum, of the material that I would cover has to do with evolution. And I always started with discussing, because I'm in a Utah context where there is a lot more more religious people, more Bible readers, more people attending seminaries and institutes and Sunday school and dealing with these things. I always told my students, look, I'm teaching about evolution, I'm not preaching about it. There are a lot of things we we can understand and know, appreciate it, and think about it, but we don't have gain a testimony of it, and we'll be just fine. Now, in this context, it's very important to understand, what is that we believe about certain topics that have to deal with science, and what does the church believe about it, and understand if our approach to it is in line with the official teachings and doctrines of the church. Now, I know that a lot of church leaders have written or said things in the past regarding these topics, and our challenge is to understand which one of these things are official doctrines, official positions, and what other things are perhaps personal opinions. And so when we get into talking about creation or evolution, we always say, well, Joseph Fielding Smith said that, or Bruce R. McConkie said that, right? And we get into these debates, but what does the church teach us about it? What is the official position? And does the church has a saying on things like how old is the earth, about biological evolution of man and animals and everything that has been created? What about Book of Mormon geography or Book of Mormon population dynamics, where people here in America before Lehi arrived, and how long have they been here, and how to reconcile that with what we study in the Bible, and so on. And so when we understand where the church stands with this, we probably can put ourselves and our mind a little bit more at ease and avoid contention to some degree, understanding that there is so much that we know and so much that we still don't know. So let's talk about evolution versus creation. Are they joined together, or they are against each other? And I love always to refer to this scripture in Doctrine and Covenants. This is the prophecy with regard of Christ's second coming and the big gathering that will take place in Adam on the Haman. And among all the other things that will happen that day, the Lord is inviting us to a fireside. And it sounds to me that it's going to be a science fireside. And bring your iPads, your notebooks, and make sure you take a lot of notes. And I don't think the Lord like to waste his time. I don't think that he's going to call upon us to tell us things we already know. He talks about things that he's going to reveal. Yea, verily I say unto you, in that day when the Lord shall come, he shall reveal all things, meaning things that we don't know, things that have been hidden, things that we don't understand. Things which have been past, and hidden things which no man knew, things of the earth by which it was made, and the purpose and the end thereof. Things most precious, things that are above, and things that are beneath, things that are in the earth, and upon the earth, and in heaven. And as I ponder on this question, on this statement, immediately the question came to me is like, if we need to have the Lord explaining us how things were made, then that means that we do not have that information. And we have Genesis, we have the temple account, but I think we need to put those things in the context of the fact that those sources are not going to tell us everything we need to know, and that the Lord will need us to explain things. So can we make good guesses about how things happen? Can we use science, personal inspiration, pondering, training in specific fields to draw conclusion or possibilities, assumption of how these things were made? Absolutely. That's why God has given us a brain. Let's use it, right? But can we impose on others this as absolute knowledge or absolute truth when the Lord himself say, wait for me to come and give it to you, right? So that's just kind of like the balance we always have to feel. And as a person, I try to always stay away from contention. If I'm a bishop in my ward, I'm a geneticist, and I go to Sunday school and I hear funny things that I don't agree with. But there is no point in creating contention, right? That's not what we're here for. We're there to feel the Spirit, and we're there to give our very best interpretation of the scriptures and the tools that are being given to us to teach them. And sometimes teachers follow the guidelines, sometimes they don't, and maybe we focus more on teaching them to follow the guidelines rather to tell them that they're wrong. Now the church in 1909, you're all familiar with that, they came out with a statement about the origin of man. It's an official first presidency statement, and still making rounds around, and I believe this to be revelation and to be coming from the Lord, from these people that were in charge of leading the church. Now 1909 is a key date because it commemorates the 100-year birth of Charles Darwin. And a lot of people in different venues were having some sort of evolution revival based on this celebration. And so there were concerns, my understanding is the historical contents of making this statement about what members could have, how the members felt about the whole concept of evolution versus things that were taught in the church. And so they felt it was necessary to make an official statement. And now, among all the things that are said here, I love the fact that they talk about a spiritual evolution. Okay, and the question I'm asking is like, why in the church we are so okay with the fact that we can evolve spiritually, but we are not okay that physically we cannot do that, right? Why there should be, it's okay in one way or the other. And on the other way, I'm also thinking, as we talk about being born as an infant from an earthly mother and an earthly father, we are not born as adults, poor mothers, right? Think about delivering an adult person, right? And so we start as a single-cell organism, and we evolve inside our mother wombs on a period of 9 months, and then when we are born, we continue to evolve until adulthood. And the whole process, is accelerated, is fast, but the reality is, look at how a human beings come into place biologically, Could that happen in other ways under God's divine guidance over periods much longer before Adam and Eve. And because of this statement, and because to some degree the church tends sometimes to say things but not to be too precise and too specific with regard to what they're trying to say, at least with that's what I get from this original statement that I saw from 1909. It was necessary to make a second statement connected to the first one, which is not as popular as the first one. This is also an official statement of the church. It was published in the improvement era, the following year, and my understanding is that came as additional inquiries that members of the church sent to the first presidency asking, is your 1909 statements, that's the question, is a statement against biological evolution? Are we say that Adam and Eve were created 6,000 years ago? That's the question. And in answer to that question, the first presidency replied in this way. And I color-coded because they are proposing 3 possibilities and choosing none of them. All right? And when the church does that to me, I interpret in a way we don't know, and we're leaving the doors open to all these possibilities or maybe even others. We are waiting for the gathering on Adam on the Hammond just as well as the whole church membership is. And maybe some prophets from time to time have been shown these things, we know that, and have been commanded to not reveal this to the general membership. And that's okay too. So there could be people, even among us today, that got it right, but the Lord is expecting them to keep them to themselves and not sharing this as an official church position. So the first option here actually seems to me that includes a possibility very much that evolution took place within God's design of the creation. Now, the creation accounts we have are in the Genesis, Moses, Abraham, and the temple, and Ben has done a great job explaining to you how this need to be read and understood. And so I'm not going to take any time here on this one. Also spoke about the concept of day, how day means actually a real day for poetry, literature, literary meanings, But here I always love to use this quote by Bruce R. McConkie, which is considered a more conservative individual when it comes to the creation, and yet he himself understands that we don't have to understand a day to be 24 hours, although that is how we're going to read it. Okay, so he says that's how we read it, that is how the writer of Genesis wants us to understand it, but the reality is, the true meaning is that God took whatever time he needed to make what he did and what he made, and he didn't stop one day and with one thing and then he start the next day with a new thing. But these periods of creation, these things could have been created or evolved simultaneously and reach their fullness or their completeness at different time as needed. I remember a number of years ago when I was working in Salt Lake City, I was asked to go to the airport, and we were having a collaboration with a university in China, and one of their colleagues was that we didn't know we weren't working with, but was somebody important in China with regard of genetic research. And so they asked us, is there a possibility for you that you're in Utah to go and pick him up at the airport and be cordial and hospitable with him and showing him around? And so we agree, and I was sent to do that, to pick him up. And as we were driving, he told me that he did his PhD and his postdoc here in the United States, so he was totally fluent in English, and he was also very familiar with American culture and with Utah culture, because his wife, while he was doing his PhD, was taking the missionary lessons to learn English. She was interested in the gospel, but she wanted to learn English, and so she met with missionaries for 2 years, I think, and probably setting up a lot of hopes in many missionaries. Writing home, we're teaching this great Chinese lady, she's very interested, and then all she was was that she wanted to learn English. But besides this confession, and the fact that he knew and was familiar with Mormon culture, and the fact that Utah is a very religious state compared to other places in the world, he was puzzled by the fact that how could we live in the 21st century with everything we know with regard of science and how things are made, and still hold on to things like the Old Testament, right? He couldn't reconcile that. And all I had to do was, look, I think Genesis is a story. It's not science, but it's a story that is trying to teach us certain principles, and we don't have to take a day, because he was very puzzled. How can God create the earth? Somebody created the earth in 6 days, right? And when in the moment I told him that these days could be any amount of time, and he looked at me, he's like, even billions of years? I was like, why not? We don't know, right? And his eyes just sparkle, right? Immediately we tear down a wall, and it made it more easy for him, to not think that we are all just like these stupid individuals that don't understand how things are happening. It was very condescending in his way to look over toward religious people. Now it wasn't, just because a wall was knocked down. In the fifth day of the creation, and we saw that to not be consistent in the order and so on, again because of the fact that they are mostly teachings about these things, and this is not a scientific textbook. I love the fact that in Abraham explains how the water to bring forth life and not God. So God prepared the waters, and the waters are the one responsible to bring forth abundantly life of every kind. And on this subject, Unibli, in his book Before Adam, basically say, quoting on Abraham, not the future tense, the waters are so treated that they will have the capacity. The gods did not make wells on the spot, but arrange it so that in time they might appear. They created the potential. Now, Unibli is not speaking for the church. The title of the presentation is "What Does the Church Believe About Evolution?" And I'm not using Unibli as the spokesperson for the church, so that's not a mistake. But the book of Abraham is scripture and is canonized, and we read it as the Word of God, or at least that's what we think and believe it is. And so it seems to me that one way to read that is the way that Unibli later on explained it. Now, for those of you that have been through the temple endowment, and I'm not going to go in great details talking about that because I don't think it's appropriate to do that, but you know that there is a question that is asked to the Savior and to Adam by the Father, and that question is, is man found on the earth? And I wish I could go to the temple and just enjoy being at the temple sometimes, but I always looking at the movies of the creation in a scientific context, and I can't help it, and I'm always trying to understand, why do we have more horses than two, or, is the grass dying, or they're eating, so there is some life, I don't know. I'm always like thinking what is going on really in there. But I know it's all imagery, but I'm trying also to see how that works with the old science. And it puzzled me that Jehovah and Michael are asked to, by themselves, under Heavenly Father stewardship and instruction, to create everything, even animals, okay? And yet, when it comes to the creation of man, Elohim, the Father, has to intervene himself. It's the first time that he's actually taking a physical or first-person participation. And physically, the Savior could create the body of Adam and Eve. What would be the difference? We're made of the same chemical elements. We function pretty much the same ways. The organs, the blood system, the skeletal system, the brain, they kind of all work about the same way. The DNA is the same. We share 50% of DNA with bananas, for heaven's sake, right? So if you can create a banana, you can create a man. And we share 98% of DNA with apes, So if he can create an orango, why could he create a man? All you need to do is just, if you look at me, shave it a little bit, not even that much, but and you got human. But here there is something the Heavenly Father has to do, and I think it's pretty obvious that the Savior at that time could not do, and that was to give a spirit and put a spirit into a physical body. And so, as we look at that, and we see that in the temple, something else comes to my mind, which is the Egyptian 9-part tradition of what constitutes a recipe for a human being. And it says, to be a human, to be a man, you need to have a physical body, you need to have a spirit, a shadow, a heart, a name, intelligence, and so on and so forth. You can read all of it on Wikipedia, so it must be true. But it's actually a true tradition. But the point is, can you have most of these elements, but let's say not a spirit as a spirit child of God in it, and still have some sort of functioning, living, biological organism that looks like a man, but is not the man, right? Can you have that? I don't know, but I think that's a good possibility. So now let's go into the church official position. Now, there was a couple statement that came out last year, and they were published in the New Era, and they were not signed by anybody, and they were in a section called "To the Point," which is a section that deals with topics, specific topics, but in a very short and concise way. This is the full article. Like when I saw that there was an article called "What Does the Church Believe About Dinosaurs" on the index, I immediately turned to that page, and then that was it. I was like, give me more, right? Why stopping? This is a good start, continue on that. And as I shared this with others in other settings, especially people that did not fully embrace the fact of the possibility that could be anything more 6,000 older than 6,000 years ago, or that there could be anything that has to do with evolution. So people that are embracing fully creationism and excluding everything else, they dismiss this as saying, well, it is in the new era, it's not in the ensign, so it's not as official, and it's not signed. Therefore, it's like if no one wrote it, right? And so no one said that. And I was like, okay, So I called the church general number, you know, and I asked, can I talk with somebody about the church magazines? And they saw me to, they sent me to the subscription department. I was like, sorry, that's not who you want to talk. Sorry, I was like, I need to phrase my request better. Can I talk with those people that actually write stuff? And the managing director for church magazines. And so I had a nice conversation, and I asked him, I was very, you know, I told them who I was, I told them the experience I had by quoting these things, and I asked them, can you give me some background information? Who writes these things? Who approves them? And is the new era some sort of second-class source of information in the church, right? And the answer was very clear, and it says, you know, all these things are written by, we have a staff, they're approved by a curriculum committee and then sent to the general authority supervisors that are in charge of a publication. So everything is screened, is approved, and if there ever is some sort of mistake, there is always a rat courage, right? Some correction published later on, which it doesn't happen often, but it did happen in the past. And this has been now out since February 2016, so I think they are pretty comfortable with this statement. And it's like it goes on LDS.org, and the only difference is that we target a younger group, a younger audience, 12 to 18, which I didn't want to say anything, but I was like, are they more receptive than adults? Is that why we're hoping that we gave up on the current generation and we're investing in the future one, because we have no hope for all of us? We're inoculating, you know, with all the other things. So, but read these words, you know, like I tend to overanalyze things, but you know, the way I'm reading it is, you know, I mean, let's read it. Did dinosaurs live and die on this earth long before man came along? And the answer is there have been no revelation on this question, and the scientific evidence says yes. You can learn more about it by studying paleontology if you like, even at Church on School. My very first evolution class I took it at BYU. It's basically saying, as a church, we don't have any supporting information. We can't contribute to that knowledge. But science is doing something, and if you want to learn about it, go to science. Is science absolutely correct? Or it doesn't make mistakes? Do they have the full picture? I don't think this is what they're saying. They're just saying, if you want to know something about it, that is the best we got, right? And it's going to get better from here, right? And so we know more than we knew in the past. We will continue to learn more by relying on both personal revelation, church revelation, and scientific method. The details of what happened on this planet before Adam and Eve aren't a huge doctrinal concern of ours. And if it is not for the church and for the brethren, why should it be for us individually? Meaning, it could be something we like to understand, but why do we have to be obsessed about it? Why do we have to stress out about it? Why do we have to impose our views and create contention on something that the church says it's not a big deal? Okay, we're not even going to deal with it at this point. And here is the key, you know, kind of ties with Ben just say, you know, and I invite you to read more of his stuff. It really has a lot of good stuff about these things today in the future. But it says the accounts of the creation in the scriptures are not meant to provide a literal scientific explanation of the specific processes, time periods of events involved. Don't take the creation account literal. Okay, and that is church official position right here. Then, as if that was not enough, in October, in the new era, there is another one of this article, and I want you to know that I copy and paste them, word for word, in their entirety, including the pictures. Okay, there is nothing that I have added here, you know, in case you miss it, you're going to get to see it right now. This is October 2016 in the new era. What does the church believe about evolution? That's the title of the article, and again, it's very short, it's 2 slides. The church has no official position on the theory of evolution. Organic evolution or changes to species' inherited traits over time is a matter for scientific study. It is not a matter for religious study, it's a matter for scientific. This is the how. The why is a matter for religious studies. It's our theology. Why we have a creation, why we have an earth, why we have a body, right? Why there was a fall. But how these things happen is a matter that science deals with it, we don't. And then again, repeats the same sentence. Nothing has been revealed concerning evolution. Though the details of what happened on earth before Adam and Eve, including how their bodies were created, have not been revealed, our teachings regarding man's origins are clear and come from Revelation. And if you read that quickly, it sounds like that they're either very confused, right? Because they're saying, well, we don't know how Adam and Eve were created, but we know how Adam and Eve were created, right? And it's like, okay, make up your mind because I'm following you here, right? But maybe they're talking about two different things. Maybe, as I say, we don't know the physical body has been created, and we have no revelation about it, so you can say pretty much whatever you want about it, and it could be just as true as wrong, And the best things we have is the scientific approach. But we know where man come from, or the purpose or the spiritual origin of it. That's how I'm reading it. In fact, if we continue with the same, this is the second part of this article. It's the full text. Before we were born on earth, we were spirit children of heavenly parents with bodies in their image. This is a little clarification from the previous accounts that we have, where it's actually specifying that it's the spirit created in the image of God, not necessarily the physical body. Okay, I know that Joseph Smith had a first vision, but again, does that apply to what Ben was teaching? Is that the way that they decide to present themselves to us so that we could understand their physical resemblances? I don't know any of that, but the point is, here we're talking about the spirit being created in the image of God, and then God directed the creation of Adam and Eve, so it's not chaos, right? Did I say right? It's not a chaotic creation or evolution, but God is involved. Things are happening because He was in control. God directed the creation of Adam and Eve, placed their spirit in their bodies. So that is why He had to come to the earth and do that. He's the only one that could have done that at that time. We are all descendants of Adam and Eve, our first parents who were created in God's image. There were no spirit children of Heavenly Father on the earth before Adam and Eve were created. It's not saying there were no human-like individuals. It's saying there were spirit. So as you look at all the animal creation, all the creations of God, do horses or cows or dogs have spirits? And as our theology teaches, yes, they do. Are they children of our Father in heaven? No, they're not. We're the only one. And can God place one of His spirit children inside a physical body? And it happens every time somebody is conceived. At what point does a spirit enters the body? We don't know. That's not been revealed. But does it happen? And the answer is yes. And the answer is yes. That he can do that. Okay. So in the few minutes that I have left, I like to, now that we know that the church can accommodate or leave the door open for things that are older than 6,000 years, let's review a little bit about how that ties in with Book of Mormon. I like to take this to clarify and go on record for it with regard of a couple things that are important. Remember, we have in our cells, we have something called mitochondrion, and then in the mitochondria we have mitochondrial DNA. We're going to see how that is used. We don't have a lot of time to go over that, but I wrote a lot and I'm going to give you another reference for it if you want to read about it more. Then we have, in addition to the mitochondrial DNA and the mitochondrion, we have nuclear DNA found in the nucleus of the cells. We have autosomal DNA, which is a chromosome from 1 to 22. And then we have sex chromosome, which is the 23 pairs of chromosome. And that includes the Y chromosome, which it determines the gender male. We're all created as with the potential to become a female without any intervention, and then the presence of a Y chromosome turns a potential natural developing female into a male. Okay, this is how the biology works. And we have features as males that they're similar to females, and we don't use them, like our breasts, for example, and that is evidence that we kind of have, we were on the same path as they are. But then the Y chromosome comes in and changes stuff, and it has used both mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome and autosomal DNA with regard to study of populations. This is our tree right there, and we have the mitochondrial DNA, which is what I'm going to focus today, because there have been some developments in the last couple of years to help us understand issues with regard to those things that people are saying about the Book of Mormon. And then the Y chromosome follow the paternal line, and the autosomal DNA is the one that comes from all of our ancestors. And when we look at mitochondrial DNA, we can create trees. We call phylogenetic trees, but they are like family trees that show how everybody is related in the world along the maternal line, and every one of these lineages is named after a specific letter, and we're going to see a little bit more about that. And then you can link these branches through history to specific geographic areas and say, okay, we see more of a specific lineage in Africa, and more of another lineage in Europe, and more of another lineage in Asia, and then in the Americas, and how we can then turn these things together and understand the expansions and the migrations that took place. And based on mitochondrial DNA, based on Y chromosome, we believe as scientists that men have been around for about 200,000 years, at least the Homo sapiens, we're talking about, our species. And based on this, the age of these branches and the distribution around the world, then we can reconstruct these migration maps that indicates how the continents were populated. And so mitochondrial Eve, Y chromosome Adam, that's how they refer in science, came out of Africa, went into Southeast Asia, then into Europe, then into Eastern Asia, Oceania, and the American continent is the last one that's been colonized. And that took place during the last ice age in the area that used to connect the Siberia, Northeast Siberia to Alaska, and that area was called Beringia, which is now replaced by a water body or water strait called the Bering Strait. And all this happened about 18,000 years ago. And regardless of what anybody is saying before in the church or outside the church, scientific evidence is overwhelming that humans have been in the Americas for about that much time, about 15,000 years. And by the time we read the Book of Mormon and we read about people coming here, there were probably millions of Asian-derived people that live into this in the American double continent. This is supported by genomic data, Y chromosome data, so autosomal data, Y chromosome data, mitochondrial data, archaeological data. We have archaeological findings that are carbon dating and found on both sides of the two continents. And nowadays they're actually doing some digging in undersea in the Bering Strait as well, see if we can find anything as well. The water is not as deep, and they're getting soil samples to see if there is anything more we can learn about that. But one of the things we understand about the water level rising and divided into two continents is you actually have mammoths remain on the Aleutian Islands, right? And so how did they get there if it wasn't that they was all connected at that time? So similarly, humans came in about that time. Now, that is the context. So we know there were people here. John Sorenson wrote about it when he wrote an article, when the Lehigh came here, were there other people, that was before the DNA era. We accept that there were other people in the Americas, and then Lehigh and his parties arrived and found those people already here. In that context, I like to point out a few changes that have been made to the Gospel Topic essay on the Book of Mormon. These changes have been made over the last couple of months. And they're small changes, but meaningful changes. And when I was asked to work on this together with other scientists for the church, I told them, it's like, look, you can probably write an article on black and the priesthood and polygamy, and that will be good for the next 20 years. But when you write an article that deals with science, you cannot leave references there that are 5, 10 years old and not touch it, because science discovers new things and changes things, so we kind of have to agree to make updates. So the original one was published, I believe, 2013, 2014, but already I felt like there was a need to clarify a couple of things. So there are 3 things that changed. They're all they're slightly changing the text to clarify, but mostly are in the references. So reference number 2 point out to an article that I wrote that is a lot longer and is found in the Interpreter. So it's about 40 pages long compared to the shorter article that is being summarized for the gospel topic. Second change has to do with this statement, which I think the church is trying to be very, very clear and more vocal about it. In reference number 6, they added this sentence. They say, though there are several plausible hypotheses regarding the geographic location of the Book of Mormon events, the church takes no official position except that events occur in the Americas. Okay? The church is not taking a position on geography, so neither should you, right? I mean, have your favorite thing, but don't tell others that they're wrong. Okay? Don't tell others that you are bad members if they don't accept your geographic model, because the church is taking no position on it. That is found also in the seminary manual that is given to our youth. Again, the church is investing on the youth and is giving up on us. Get the message, right? They are receptive. They are listening. Even a few days ago, talking about the new videos that the church is making with regard of the Book of Mormon, they had an article in the Desert News, which is owned by the church, and it says it's not like the movie that was made on the Book of Mormon, nor will Book of Mormon videos give a nod to location theories either. All right? They're trying to keep it as natural as possible. So very clear message about stay away from it or like it, but don't fight over it. Okay? Reference 15 has a new article that came out after the original Book of Mormon and DNA Studies essay was published. And this article is called, Does Mitochondrial Haplogroup X Indicate Ancient Transatlantic Migration to the Americas? A critical revaluation. Now, why this is relevant is because there was a video that came out last year about, this is the title of the video, and I'm not going to say, anything about any theories. I have my ideas, but I don't have a preferred theory. And with regard to the North American model, the Heartlander model, they might even be right to me for what it matters to me. They might even be correct. They might get it right, okay? But if they're using DNA as an evidence for that, and then eventually that we will find out that they were right, it's pure luck, right? Because there is no genetic evidence for it, okay? And I will spend the remaining time, the last 3 minutes, to talk about that. But the video, the title of the video that went viral and was shared on Facebook, like I would get people send me this video about 5 or 6 times a day and say, hey, have you seen that? Have you seen that? I was like, yeah, I did. Okay, and I had a copy and paste message for everybody. And but that's the title. That's the title of the video, DNA versus Book of Mormon, incredible. I copy and paste it from YouTube, so that's in capital letter, incredible new evidence. And Rod Meldrum is explaining to him why to him that is such a strong evidence. And he uses his haplogroup X as evidence for it. And so this is where the haplogroup X is found on the tree we saw before. And it does say the haplogroup X is found in the Americas and is found in the Old World as well, so no problem up to this point. And this is where haplogroup X sits on the detailed trees of the world. So there is an haplogroup X, but there is not an haplogroup X. Is that clear? Right? So you notice on the right side of the screen there are some IDs. And every sub-branch of haplogroup X, every sub-lineage of haplogroup X is represented by these IDs, which are actually real people that have been tested, that have the mutation that you see listed there in blue and black, that help determine which sub-branch of haplogroup X you belong to. But we have not found a single individual in the world that has only the characteristics for haplogroup X. Means that it's like you're doing genealogy, you know your name, you know your parents' name, and then you don't know your paternal grandfather's name because your father was adopted. Well, it doesn't mean that your paternal grandfather never existed. It's just you don't know who it is. And the same thing is here. We know the haplogroup X existed in the past, but there is no one in the world that carries the mutation that identified that group. So all we have are sub-branches or sub-lineages of haplogroup X. So the question we have to understand is, would the sub-lineages in the Americas correspond to the sub-lineages in the Middle East? And can we tell something about the relationship of these two groups of people that carry those mutations? So that is the question that we need to answer. So when you look at the general haplogroup X, meaning everyone that fit under haplogroup X, we find that we find them in Americas and in the Middle East and in the Old World. And scientists suggest that this is how the haplogroup X got to the New World, so through the Beringia Strait that has been in America for a long time. We're going to see that. But then Heartlanders say, well, you know, this is not correct. You know, we find it in the Middle East, we find it in America, so that is Book of Mormon legacy. They came here with a ship, they came here in recent time, and that is the point that I like to clarify. And I think this man is one of those that help understand the issue. Kennewick Man was found on the Columbia River in the state of Washington in 1996, and very recently, full genome sequence was done on him. All autosomal DNA, Y chromosome, and mitochondrial DNA done. All the 3.2 billion bases sequence for him. And we learned a few interesting things on it. First of all, notice where he was found geographically, right? It is closer to the Bering Strait migration, right? It's also carbon dated to 8 to 9,000 years ago, which is before 6,000 years ago, right? So creationists will say, well, that didn't happen. Well, I just showed to you, it could have happened. You know, the church is okay with that, so we should, too, leave that door open. But when we look at the tree, and every single blue square, light blue and dark blue square you see there, those are all the Native Americans that have been found and tested in the scientific literature belonging to this sub-lineage called X2A, which is only found in America. It's found nowhere else in the world, only in America, mostly in the Great Lakes area. But here where you put the Kennewick Man is ancestral to every line that are found in the America. So when you look at X2A today, they have all additional mutation because they're more recent. But when we go back 9,000 years ago, there was a pure X2A with no additional mutation that sits on the top of the tree. It is ancestral, or the people that were with him, because he's a male, he could have not passed that, but the people that were with him are the ancestors of the X2As that is found in the Great Lakes area. That's where it comes from. Not Book of Mormon people, but the group of people that came with the Kennewick Man, or the ancestor of the Kennewick Man. So 4 reasons why X2A cannot be used to support Book of Mormon migration. Use anything else, but when you use DNA, you're making, you're teaching science incorrectly. Okay, I'm not going to use other words, but you're not being fully honest, or you don't fully understand how that works. So X2A is found exclusively in the America, is not found in the Middle East. There are other branches of X2 that are found in the Middle East, X2B, X2C, X2D, but no X2A. So, and we don't have the Middle Eastern branches in the Americas, and we don't have the American branches in the Middle East. They're cousins with each other. They had their own development or phylogeny or branches of the tree. One is not above the other, which means that the lineages in the Middle East are not the ancestor of the one of America, and the one in America is not the ancestor of the one in the Middle East. It's the missing link of the mitochondrial DNA X2A, you know, if you want to use a human evolution term, you know, the missing link. The date, because we can date this mutation, considerably predate Book of Mormon events. So it places X2A in America several thousand years before the arrival of Book of Mormon. And that's, we knew this, but when the Kennewick Man came around, we learned 4 new things that are pretty much closing the subject at the moment with what we know about science. And first of all, as I show you, the Kennewick Man stands on the top, is the ancestor of all the X2As in America. It's carbon dated 9,000 years ago. It's found geographically close to the Bering Strait, placing and supporting Aboriginal expansion. And when they did his autosomal DNA, it's not European, it's not Old World. He has the same autosomal DNA of all the Native Americans. So he is a Native American, is not European or a Middle Eastern. And he has a mitochondrial DNA that is the one that is being used for the Heartlanders. And so I want to go on record to say X2A mitochondrial DNA, as we know today, does not support the Great Lakes geography for the Book of Mormon. Okay? And so I hope that is clear based on that. This is the concluding, the article that is referenced now in the Gospel Topic essay is the concluding statement by these 2 researchers, which I actually know personally, and I was initially involved with the project, and then I just let them run with it because I didn't want to be, people feel like I'm biased toward that, so just like, do your own thing. But I'm the one that has published more X2A sequences than any other person or scientist that I know of. If you do a Google research or PubMed research, which is the National Library for Science, you find about 5 articles on X2A, and I contributed to 3 of them. So I think I know something about the behavior of this particular marker. But here is what I say. It is of course possible that genetic evidence of an ancient transatlantic migration event simply has not been found yet. Okay? We're not shutting all the doors, right? But as of today, should credible evidence of direct gene flow from an ancient Salatrian or Middle Eastern population, that is what they wrote, they put that in parentheses, population be found within ancient Native American genomes, it will require the field to reassess the Beringian-only model of prehistoric Native American migration. However, no such evidence has been found, and the Beringian migration model remains the best interpretation of the genetic, archaeological, and paleoclimatic data to date with regard of this X2A. I have no more time. I was going to address a paper that was brought to my attention a couple of days ago about 38 Mayan skeletons, and I don't know really how to address that because we don't have the time to do that. Let me just say this. So there have been some critics of the church that have jumped on this paper saying that is further evidence that there is no Middle Eastern DNA in America and therefore the Book of Mormon is not true, because these are skeletons that are found in the Mayas, and they all have the mitochondrial DNA, the maternal DNA that is typical of Native Americans. But the point is, I actually wrote to the authors and I asked them some background information on their research. And when you see a paper published, it's nice, polished, peer review and everything, but you don't understand all the mess that went on to put that paper together. And unless you have published science in your life, you don't know, you know what I'm talking about if you have published scientific articles before. And it's like walking into a house of somebody and having a perfectly clean living room. And you assume that the whole house is just nice and tidy like that. And then, you ask, can I go to the bathroom? It's like, no, go to the neighbors, right? Because it's not clean, right? So we only see the papers published. We don't know a lot of things. One thing that caught my attention, I'm going to just say that, and forgive me, we're not going to have questions for answer for questions. We start 5 minutes late, right? Time for questions. Sorry, and there was one sentence in there that says, one sample did not work. So one of the questions I asked the author is like, why did this sample not work, right? Simple question. It's like, was it that the DNA was damaged, like it says on the article, or there were other issues about it? And then she said, the corresponding author told me, well, the DNA that turned out wasn't what we expected, okay? I don't know what it is. She did not want to share it. I understand why, because they might be using for future publications, so you don't reveal all your secrets, right? That's how scientists strive. You know, you publish or you perish, right? And so it's like, you know, did you try to include that in your publication? Because sometimes they include unusual data also in the publication. Other times they just dismiss it and they do the cleaning, right? This doesn't look like what we expected, so we're going to leave it out. And she say, well, we sent it in the original publication, but the reviewer told us to remove it. Right, and so they took it out, and I'm dying to see what this sample looked like. But she told me it did not have the genetic characteristics of mitochondrial DNA, of a Native American mitochondrial DNA. I don't know what that means. It could mean nothing or anything. There are a lot of other reasons why this paper should not be interpreted the way that the critics are interpreting it. But this is just one simple example that not everything looks as perfect as we read it. Okay, there are some background stories that sometimes are worth. And most of these skeletons, by the way, are dated between 800 and more recent years after Lehi arrival. So we're not even looking at the same thing. And again, we're making some assumption based on geographic location, time, how the Book of Mormon people mix with locals, how soon did they kept as an homogeneous population isolate, or did they mix with the local natives, how soon did they happen. A lot of these things we don't know. And I want to close with one thing, because with these things right here, two things. One is, this is autosomal DNA, Nature 2017. Nature is the top-notch scientific journal. And with autosomal DNA, they're actually now considering possible migrations that are not Beringian, that have happened maybe in more recent times in the Pacific Ocean between South America and Micronesia. One of these studies actually found Native American DNAs in the population of Easter Island. Okay, so how did they get there? When? Did they go from America to Easter Island? Did they go from Easter Island to America? We don't know. You see that the arrows are bidirectional, you know, so there's still a lot of questions we don't know. When they say DNA proves that there was no migrations to the America other than the Bering Straits, like there's so much things that we still don't understand. And I'm teaching Book of Mormon this year at BYU this summer, not this year, just this summer. That's why I'm here also in Utah. And I'm teaching the first half of the Book of Mormon, and I'm getting a new appreciation for the small plates that Mormon decide to include. And we all think, you know, when Mormon says these are included for a wise purpose, we immediately think about Martin Harris and the 116 pages. I'm actually coming to understand personally that there is maybe a second wise purpose. It has to do with DNA. And something that Mormon would have not known. But every reference that we can read in the text that there were other people here are all from the small plates. You know, 2 Nephi chapter 5 talks about Nephi's family following him, leaving the place, and others. Right? Who are these others? Jacob chapter 2. Jacob admonished the Nephites for having too many wives and concubines. Right? Where are they getting them? You know, and there is some understanding that maybe concubine, based on the Old Testament reading, could be somewhere that is not from your own ethnic group. Okay? You know, like Abram. What was her name? Hagar. Yeah, she was an Israelite, right? And so she's referred to as a concubine. And then we have the Sherem approaching Jacob, you know, and be knowledgeable about the language and looking for an opportunity to meet with Jacob. I was like, wait a second, if he's from the same family group, right? How long does it take him to? So what I'm saying is like we're getting a lot of little information about this immediate mixing or contact with the natives, and we get all of that from the small place. Wars with the Lamanites immediately, right there in Book of Omni, you know, already wars, and it takes us all the way to 150, and we don't know anything between Nephi time and basically we don't know anything between Nephi and Jacob and Mosiah. You know, there are 350 years that we don't know anything, and yet all these things could have happened right in those years, and we don't know anything about that. So, you know, I have a really difficult time as a scientist, as a geneticist, as a religious educator, to put my testimony on genetic evidence, the lack of or the presence of, based on my testimony in the Book of Mormon based on DNA. You know, I much rather focus on other things because I think there are so many unknown that we don't know, and to decide your eternal destiny and how and your membership in the church based on all this unknown, to me you're taking a huge risk. And this is all I have to share. So sorry for going so long. As a bishop of Rome, doesn't that make you infallible? Of course. Ask my wife. If so, doesn't that make you right on evolution? I'm not going to answer that question. Okay? But yeah, that's enough. So how am I going to answer these other ones?
Pick a couple. Just pick a couple.
Should I still do that? Many points to sacrifice. Yeah, again, it says, you know, Second Nephi chapter 2, there are many points that refute evolution. You know, I'm referring you to what Ben just said, you know. Where does Second Nephi text come from? Brass plates. Brass plates are similar to the Old Testament, written maybe in a slightly different language, maybe more information, more details. But again, you know, are we reading that as a scientific text? You know, what did Ben say? Is that how God is teaching us some principle, leaving a lot of the details out? I don't believe Second Nephi is refutes evolution at all. Okay. What have you come to understand about Neanderthal and Lucy and other old discovery? And again, you know, could have been a human-like individual before Adam and Eve, and that's up to you to answer this question after the things that have been shared between what Ben has said and he has written a lot more stuff in the books that he suggested, and also the statements of the church. So yes, there could have been Neanderthals, there were Neanderthals. As of today, there is evidence that every one of us here with European origin carry about 2 to 4% of Neanderthal DNA in our genome. So not only Neanderthal existed, they are in your family tree. And this is the current knowledge that we have. How we have that? Because we have full sequence genomic data for Neanderthal, and we have fully sequenced genomic data for Homo sapiens, and we found introgression of DNA unidirectional, coming from Neanderthal to Homo sapiens and not going from Homo sapiens to Neanderthal. And one of the reasons that happened is that Neanderthals were genetically fit for their environment they lived in, which has been, so they've been longer in Europe and living in those climate condition and environment than Homo sapiens. And so when Homo sapiens arrived, that's a theory, you know, we were not there to take pictures of what happened, but when Homo sapiens arrived, then if crossbreeding took place, their genes of the Neanderthal would have had a better chance to become stabilized in future generation than the other way around. Then looks like the Homo sapiens get rid of Neanderthals eventually outcompeted. No, you know, they were maybe better technology or other ways, and then they become extinct. But we do have a genetic legacy of Neanderthals in us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.